Hello, and welcome to another summary of our Leadership in Extraordinary Times series. I'm Professor Andrew Stephen, the Research Dean and L'Oreal Professor of Marketing here at Oxford University's Said Business School. During October, November, and December of 2020, our Leadership in Extraordinary Times broadcast shifted from a focus on the immediate crisis facing the world to asking what happens next. Specifically, during the final months of 2020, my colleagues and our guests discussed three key questions. First, what are the permanent changes that we are seeing? Second, what are the knock-on consequences, intended or otherwise, of these changes? And third, how do we make sure that we all respond to all of this in a way that builds forward better? To begin our summary, let's start with something that's changed in how we all work, and it's something I'd say almost all of us have become extremely familiar with, and that is, of course, working from home. Asha Kazazian, Director of Global Real Estate for the global law firm Shearman & Sterling, gave us her take.
There was a notion, I think, for many industries around the globe that if you didn't show up to work, you were not working. And many industries, I would say more on the financial services, legal services side where I work, and others on the periphery of those two industries, and the clients that they served had that belief, they maintained that belief. And COVID shook that up. Somewhere between 40 and 42% of employees wish to remain to work from home and or some hybrid version where they're working from home 2 to 3 days a week.
An interesting perspective on our need to remote work also came from Ronan Giorno, who's the European Head of Operations and Senior Managing Director at real estate firm Hines. This has had a number of effects. He spoke about remote work playing a role in leveling corporate hierarchies. So let's hear what he had to say.
It doesn't matter whether you're the CFO, CEO of the company, or the most junior graduate. You've all become a square on a screen, and you have become, another voice. So the old world symbols of space have disappeared. The executive floor, the corner office, the additional assistants outside, they've all disappeared. And that has a huge cultural impact on companies and the way we use space and offices.
But all of this also raises some really important practical and financial questions, most of which right now we of course can't answer. My colleague, Professor Andrew Baum, a Professor of Management Practice at Oxford Said and the Director of the Oxford Future of Real Estate Initiative, talked about some of the possible consequences from his area of expertise, real estate, and the impact on offices in, for example, central business districts or CBDs.
If we are able to move to more home working, will that result in more space being provided in CBD offices per worker? So in other words, no economic benefit because the space that's saved will simply be reallocated to collaboration space, better quality space, or will occupiers actually reduce their CBD costs? Will they save rent, business rates, property taxes, utility costs? And if they do that, where does that money go? Will it lead to more profits for Shearman & Sterling? Will it lead to higher salaries for the staff? Or will it go into third space costs?
As Andrew explored these questions further, we can see how very complicated this change in behavior could really become.
For example, employees might go to their employers and say, I'm now working from home, you're going to save costs in the office. I need to have a fourth bedroom, I need to have an office in the garden, I need to have a study, I'm going to have to spend more on housing costs, I need more salary. Or alternatively, I'm going to have to spend more on commuting because I'm going to have to go further to get bigger housing that's going to give me the suitable space to work from home. Or maybe the cost of third space provision will fall on the employee. So maybe the employee says, look, I'm going to choose not to work from home, I'm going to choose to work in a third space, and I need that cost to be subsidized or supplemented in my salary.
Now, of course, there are further implications too, for taxation, for the future of cities, for the ties between employers and employees. Panelists in a discussion on the future of recruitment, for instance, envisaged those employer-employees ties loosening. More employees would become freelancers with portfolio careers enabled by open talent platforms such as Upwork. This is Paul Estes, author of The Gig Mindset.
I continue to believe that not having a gig economy strategy in 2020 is the same as not embracing the internet in 1990 or the mobile revolution in 2010. We all know the stories about companies who did not see a structural shift in the way work would get done, and then what happened to those companies, and the companies that did embrace that and where they are today. And so I believe in many ways, we're starting to see freelancers and the gig economy and these open talent platforms structurally change many aspects of business. Workers are demanding flexibility. Companies are now providing that flexibility, and you're starting to see that shift. And so I think more and more are going to reach into independent work, freelancing as part of a portfolio career to reskill and to keep some sort of stability in their lives.
We can see that there are many advantages for companies working in this model. They can hire the best talent from anywhere in the world. They can access niche expertise for as long as they want it, and they can increase diversity. But again, there are potential consequences that may not have yet been completely thought through, as my colleague, Dr. Greta Corporal, a research fellow and British Academy postdoctoral fellow here at Oxford Said, suggested.
These new model of works that are emerging, and they offer significant advantages like freedom and flexibility and autonomy and remote work, enabling you to better integrate your work life with your home life. It also brings challenges, and one of them is that it kind of clashes with established norms and expectations in society. For instance, when we think about social benefits or pensions.
And I think that is the elephant in the room in all of these discussions. We've seen what happened at the lower skilled end of the gig economy. A promise of flexibility and autonomy became, in practice, precariousness and low pay. So how can we make sure that the new normal of remote working doesn't become a race to the bottom on pay, benefits, and workers' rights? More broadly, how can we make sure that we build forward and build forward better? This is what Kumi Naidoo, former Secretary General of Amnesty International, had to say.
After the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis, when many were saying we would never go back to normal, what we saw was an approach by those with power of system recovery, system maintenance, and system protection. When what was needed then and what was needed now was system innovation, system redesign, and system transformation. If we are to move forward, we have to be willing to now say that to get out of the moment where we are is not simply going to be a question of incremental improvements.
In terms of changes, however, perhaps they have not yet gone far enough. This was the perspective shared by Morgan Stanley's Alison Binns in discussing the US Business Roundtable's commitment in 2019 to all stakeholders.
You don't see companies in the US being comfortable with putting employees on their boards, which I think would be sort of a meaningful indicator that a company really does have a stakeholder approach, because frankly, employees are probably the most important stakeholder group without which the company does not exist. And we just don't have that acknowledgement that maybe you have to fundamentally change how you think about a corporation. And I will say, not as a sort of get out of jail free card, but our legal system here is not set up to support stakeholder capitalism.
And Bob Eccles, a visiting professor of management practice here at Oxford, wasn't prepared to let companies off the hook.
I got to tell you, reading the papers, it seems to me like I saw a lot more people being laid off than I saw dividends being cut, and that's a choice that companies can make. That was a test, right? They were tested, there was trade-offs, and they made the trade-offs in favor of keeping the dividends and laying off employees, putting it on the state, saying there's unemployment insurance, and there was no legal requirement that they have to do that. They could have made the other choice. They could have cut the dividends and kept the people.
But speakers were clear that it is not just up to companies we all have a part to play in changing the system or systems for the better.
I think there's going to be a big sea change in how people invest. So your own personal investment strategies, how are they moving towards sustainability and moving in the right direction for, mitigating climate change, mitigating inequality, et cetera.
I want a simple 2 to 3 page stakeholder inclusive company specific statement of purpose by the board of directors that doesn't read like it could come from any company. What's unique about that company, how they make trade-offs, and to follow up on it with integrated reporting to explain how they're accomplishing their purpose, where they're failing, what they plan to do to kind of get back on target.
One of the stakeholders of stakeholder capitalism is employees. So whatever the side you work, in the corporate side or in the investor side, just raise your voice saying like, that we regard these issues are important and it should be, internally monitored and it should be externally disclosed.
So, as we look back on the year of disruption, uncertainty, and sheer difficulty that was 2020, and think ahead now that we're in 2021, what's next? Of course, none of us have a crystal ball, and under still such uncertain times around the world, it's hard to make reliable predictions. But one thing I think that we do know from last year is that our organizations, our colleagues, frankly, our humanity is adaptable. We're oftentimes more resilient than we give ourselves credit for, and when faced with major constraints, adversity, and great challenges, we can and do rise to the occasion. So for all of us optimists, and I certainly count myself as one of them, who look forward to a brighter and better future, the onus is now upon us to make that happen. Building forward better and stronger is a rallying cry for sure. But we need to think about the tangible actions that we will take and that we will lead in 2021 and beyond. We heard a lot in this video about change ways of working and ways of thinking about business. Changes are happening, and they were before the pandemic as well, although we've certainly seen accelerated change due to the pandemic. As my colleagues and their guests said, we need to think about consequences, intended and unintended, of these changes, and also give thought to how we can affect the right kinds of changes as we keep on going. I'm Professor Andrew Stephen. Thanks for watching, and I hope you join us soon for another episode of Oxford Saïd's Leadership in Extraordinary Times. Please follow us on social media or check our website to keep up to date with our upcoming broadcasts.